This is BBC Television.
On the 23rd of November 1963, the day after John F. Kennedy was assassinated, a new British drama aired its first episode on BBC television at 5:15 Greenwich Mean Time. This show was about a young schoolgirl and her strange grandfather who travel through time and space in a vehicle called the TARDIS, which on the outside looks like a small regular police box, but on the inside is much bigger. The show began life as something educational, using stories of time travel as a means to explore scientific ideas and famous moments in history. But the show wasn't just interested in science and history. Even by its second serialized story, Doctor Who introduced a group of terrifying Nazi-like alien mutants called Daleks, which terrified and thrilled a whole generation of families.
Your legs are paralyzed.
It wasn't long before Doctor Who gained the reputation for being the most thrilling, exciting and terrifying show on television. A show that would go on for the next 60 years and air over 800 episodes to date, and would become one of the most influential and important works of sci-fi and horror ever made.
Don't turn your back, don't look away, and don't blink. Good luck.
Join me as we continue exploring the evolution of alien horror as we journey through time and space and explore the world of Doctor Who.
Would you like a chili, baby?
Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Munzer, and as ever, I am your host. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres one series at a time. We are currently in the middle of our journey through the evolution of alien horror, and this is part 8. This week's episode is sponsored by $20 Patreon subscriber David Emerson and his partner Eloise Plant. And in this week's episode, as that intro suggested, we're going to be doing something pretty big, pretty ambitious. We are going to be talking about Doctor Who. That is a TV show with over 800 episodes that has spanned nearly 60 years, and we're going to try and cover the whole thing in one 2-hour discussion. So, what I will say is this won't be a spoilerific discussion. We will be talking about the show broadly, about the history of the show, about the evolution of the show. We'll be going through each Doctor, through each era of this TV show, from its beginnings in 1963 all the way through to the recent Jodie Whittaker iteration of the programme. And in the second half of the episode, we will be going through my guests' and the listeners' favourite ever episodes of Doctor Who. I asked you guys on the Evolution of Horror discussion group and on Twitter to send me your picks for your best and scariest Doctor Who episodes. Joining me to discuss all things Doctor Who, I've got a brand new guest with me. She is a writer who's actually just about to have her first horror novel published, and she's also a massive die-hard Doctor Who fan. A big welcome to Alison Rumfitt. Hello, Alison.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm excited to discuss all things Doctor Who with you. First of all, though, Alison, just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I am an unabashed horror fan and a horror writer. I have a novel coming out this year called Timey, I'm Worthless that is being published by Cypher Press in the UK, which is it's a very strange haunted house novel that is probably not like any other haunted house novel that people have read.
Oh, so exciting. And the novel is called Tell Me I'm Worthless. And when is that going to be out, Alison, for people to pick up a copy and give it a read?
It's out in October.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with the horror genre then. Have you always been a lifelong horror fan?
Honestly, so apart from the subject of today's episode, I was not engaging much with horror until I would say I was about 12, 13, when I started sort of sneakily watching horror films on my laptop and sort of watching, I think some of the first horror films I watched were like the VHS films.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why those were what I decided to watch. They're not great. They're not bad, but they're not great.
Yeah, they've got some good bits and bad bits, haven't they? Like all anthology films.
Yeah, the cult bit in the second one, that's the real highlight.
Yeah.
So I think from that point on, I'd always had sort of an interest and I got into Neil Gaiman as well. I think that was helpful, reading loads of Sandman. And sort of, from that point on, I really fell in love with horror and started to explore the genre a lot. Started to read the classics. I mean, the good thing about Neil Gaiman is he was always very open about what his influences were. So I could then go and read Shirley Jackson, and I could go and watch the films that he talked about. And obviously, he also wrote for Doctor Who.
Yes.
Twice.
So tell us, we're here obviously to talk about Doctor Who, and actually it seems to be a lot of people's kind of horror origin stories. People have written in a lot, or people I've spoken to have sort of said they fell in love with horror or scary stuff because of being petrified by Doctor Who as a kid, as a kind of gateway into the genre, I suppose. But what is your kind of history with this show?
My history with the show is when it was revived in 2005, I was still pretty young then. I can't remember exactly how young, but my dad had been a fan of the show from when he was a child, so he was excited to watch the revival, and it was basically a family thing where we all sat down and watched that first episode back, and sort of immediately it was like, oh, this is going to be the thing. And then from that point on, it became especially me, my dad, and my brother, we would every Saturday when Doctor Who was on, we would sit down and we would watch it. And then probably the next day, me and my brother would watch it again because we were that kind of people. I think the third episode of the revival in 2005, which was called The Unquiet Dead, I remember absolutely terrified me. And that was my first experience of Doctor Who being maybe that was the scariest thing I found from Doctor Who. It was that episode was very upsetting as a kid.
Yeah, how old were you, if you don't mind revealing your age? How old were you when that first series was airing?
God, I'm not even sure. I must have been about, I'm gonna guess at 10, but I'm not entirely sure.
Right, that's perfect age for it.
And that was a perfect age for it, but also that particular episode, there's ghosts and zombies and in possessing corpses, and it was quite a lot. From that point on, I ended up going back and watching a lot of the classic show and falling in love with that, as well as continuing to watch the new episodes, and it just became such a part of me. I'd get teased for it at school, but I could be teased for much worse than liking a BBC show.
Absolutely, it's so true. So we are gonna try and sort of go through this entire show in this kind of hour and a half discussion, which is a challenge, but let's see how we manage it. We're gonna try and spoil not too much, this hopefully discussion will be appreciated by fans, but also good for entry level as well. And with that in mind, I want to ask you question one, a very basic question. What is Doctor Who?
See that's not a basic question in a way. That's quite a tough question, and I think everyone creating the show and every actor who's played the Doctor probably has a very different interpretation. I would say at its core, Doctor Who is a science fantasy show. It's not science fiction. It delves into science fiction, but it's mostly science. It's more fantastical than serious science fiction about traveling throughout the universe and throughout time in a broken box and dealing with a variety of moral and ethical issues. Often those moral and ethical issues involve weird monsters.
Exactly. And what's so great about it is that premise is quite broad, right? I mean, the show can kind of be anything. It can be any genre. It could be any tone. But unlike, for example, a show like The Twilight Zone, which was going on in America at this point, it isn't just completely unrelated stories. We've got this one character that sees us through this entire show. The Doctor, right? This alien Time Lord. And he travels around in this, what looks like a police box from the outside. It's a TARDIS, and he can go to any time or place. And therefore, the world is its oyster, right? Because of that character and because of that machine, the show can literally go anywhere and do anything.
I think I struggle to think of a genre that Doctor Who has not dabbled in or tried its hand at. It's done westerns. It's done westerns actually a couple of times. It's done more straight up horror. It's tried to do serious science fiction. It's done in the early run of the series. It tried pretty much pure historical stories because when it was conceived, it was going to be much more of an educational show. About trying to teach the youngsters of Britain about various history. But then that's why the first real story arc is about cavemen. I think it immediately undoes any educational purpose it maybe wanted to have by having a story about cavemen that has pretty much no historical basis at all.
I know. And also it goes straight from the first story about cavemen into the second one, which is Daleks. And so it's like it gets straight into that kind of stuff fairly quickly, actually, doesn't it, in a way? You know, some of that kind of more creepy alien stuff, I suppose.
I think that the Daleks was still an attempt at some form of education. I think that was what Terry Nation, who created the Daleks, that was where he was coming from. It was too soon post World War II to do a story about Nazis, but you could do a story about Nazis that were metal pepper pots that shouted in metallic voices. And that's also, and again, that first Dalek story is all about ethical quandaries of pacifism and whether pacifism is actually not worse, is just as bad as carrying out violence if you are pacifistic in the face of extreme violence. That is what that first Dalek story is trying to talk about.
It's a really interesting thing, isn't it? And I think that idea that it's all these different things coming together. I mean, it felt like there were quite a few people, weren't there, involved in the sort of genesis of this show. Obviously, people like producer Verity Lambert, but also head of drama Sydney Newman, writers Anthony Coburn, and people like that, coming up with this sort of strange show that it feels like it's doing that old-fashioned BBC thing of wanting to, like we've said, educate as well as entertain in a way, right? But also, I can't help but think it must have also been influenced by some of those sci-fi horror serials like the Quatermass shows that had come before this as well, and that kind of thing, which had been so huge. And it's just a really interesting sort of mashup, I suppose, of things. But I wonder what they, no one probably could have known, right, just how incredibly popular and how long-lasting this show was going to be back when it first aired in 1963, I suppose.
Well, so much so that it was, I mean, the reason that things like regeneration, which, if you're listening to us and you have not seen Doctor Who, regeneration is what happens between when one actor playing the Doctor leaves. It's written, unlike James Bond, where another actor will just take over and it will be it won't be acknowledged at all by in the sort of meta of the story. In Doctor Who, it's part of the story. In the early days, it would be perhaps quite abrupt. The first regeneration is very strange and abrupt. William Hartnell, who was the first Doctor, was quite ill at that point, so it really was. It was a convenience because he could not have continued playing the Doctor much longer. And as it went on, the idea of regeneration became one of the most important things in the show. Like the stories around the regeneration, the stories building up to that would become huge. and especially in the revival, it was, I remember when David Tennant's regeneration was one of the biggest things possible when that was happening. It was huge. I don't actually like that story. I think it's quite horrible, but it was a phenomenon. It was like, oh, he can't leave. How's the show's going to survive without David Tennant? He's so good, and then obviously it did.
Yeah. It's really interesting, isn't it? They've really kind of woven that in, and it's meant that it is a series that can just go on and on. I'd like to go through, and we'll talk a little bit about the different various Doctors and the different sort of eras, I suppose, of this show. But first of all, as well, let me ask you another maybe easy, maybe quite complex question: is who is the Doctor then? Like, what defines the Doctor as a character?
The Doctor is he's a Time Lord, which, well, we're already getting into messy stuff, because is a Time Lord a species? I think it turns out it's not really a species, it's sort of a rank. But the Doctor is a Time Lord who ran away from his planet. The show, over the course of its history, comes up with various reasons for why he... I'm saying he because... At least at that point, yes. The Doctor was played by a man. But the Doctor ran away from their planet, I should say, for various possible reasons. The most enduring one is simply that the Time Lords were quite a stuffy, oppressive group of people, and the Doctor didn't want to be around that. And then I guess the Doctor is defined by... the idea of being coming into a situation as an outsider and not necessarily imposing themselves on it, but trying to help the people in a situation.
And we've had so many different versions of the Doctor too, which we'll go through. But what, in your opinion, Alison, makes what kind of personality tropes, I suppose, should the Doctor have, in your opinion, and what makes a good... What makes a good version of the Doctor compared to the not so good ones? A strong moral compass that sometimes fails. I think it is important that the Doctor is not always right in a situation. And I think a lot of the best stories are about the people who travel with the Doctor saying, this is what you're doing is wrong, like you need to rethink this, and the Doctor being reminded of that humanity. So I think that's an important part of it. I think the Doctor is alien, which is often hard to remember when they're played by a human actor and they look like a human and they talk like a human and they talk English. The Doctor is loopy and funny. The first Doctor is a professor, or like a grandfather. The second Doctor is... I don't even know what the second Doctor is, a sort of strange hermit. The third one is an erudite British action hero. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? And they've always got with them a companion. And again, like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't seen much of the show in general, but it feels to me that in the old days, the companion and the Doctor had more of a sort of father-child dynamic, or grandfather-grandchild, or whatever it might be, whereas that has changed somewhat, it seems, in the revival, where, there might be more of a romance between a Doctor and a companion or whatever else. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it was probably a storytelling choice in the revival to have the Doctor be a little sexier, played by younger, more attractive actors, and to have a sort of core flirtation between the Doctor and companions. There's not really any of that in the classic show, with a couple of exceptions, and those exceptions are mostly around Tom Baker,
right,
Fourth Doctor, and that's also partly just that Tom Baker was in relationships with some of his co-stars at the time, so it's sort of
right.
You sort of have to have that reading there, because there is an undeniable chemistry.
Yeah.
And it is the dynamic definitely changed with the revival.
And sexier, I suppose, is the right word to describe it, isn't it? I guess.
I'm sure people find Peter Davison sexy.
Yeah.
The first time the Doctor was really sexy was the Eighth Doctor, Paul McGann, who in one of his only screen appearances as the Doctor, he was the first Doctor to kiss a companion, and that, I think that was probably what they then took into the revival. But before that, it wasn't really in the realm of what the show was doing.
Let's talk a little bit about the way in which the show dabbles with horror as well then.
Yeah.
Because it really feels like, again, you probably know a bit more about this than me, but it feels as though, like you said, at the beginning this show was dealing with science, it was being more educational, exploring times and places and themes and that kind of thing. And then something sort of seemed to change, didn't it, in maybe the 1970s, is that fair to say, where it then started to share more with almost Hammer and that kind of sort of horror history, I suppose. Yes,
that wasn't the first time Doctor Who was scared. Doctor Who is actually pretty scary even in its first story. There's actually, we don't really have a proper name for the caveman story. It's generally called An Unearthly Child. But even in that, there's violence, and it's because of the nature of the black and white cameras, it's quite gloomy and hard to see what's happening. And there are a couple quite frightening stories throughout the earlier run, but definitely in the 70s when Peter Hinchcliffe became, was it script editor? That was when the show started to really dabble with real horror. That was when Mary Whitehouse became aware of the show and sort of went on a moral crusade against it.
Yes, I was reading about this particular era, right, in the 70s when the show got arguably at its most dark, its most gothic, and Mary Whitehouse was just appalled, wasn't she, by Doctor Who, and she tore the show to shreds.
Yeah, she described Genesis of the Daleks, which is the Tom Baker episode, as tea time brutality for tots. The Brain of Morbius as containing some of the sickest and most horrific material seen on children's television. She's actually not wrong. That particular story is quite upsetting.
Yeah, we're going to get to that one. Yeah.
And the Seeds of Doom, which was that same run of Tom Baker, as containing... This is quite a funny quote. Strangulation by hand, by claw, by obscene vegetable matter is the latest gimmick, sufficiently close up so that they get to the point. And just for a little variety, show the children how to make a Molotov cocktail. I think she's not exactly wrong that the show was getting quite violent at that point. I just don't really see it as much of a problem because I really like those stories. I think that run especially is a really powerful series of stories that are still very effective. Despite the very low BBC 70s effects budget, they can be very effective and upsetting with what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it was that little era, sort of 1975 to 77, right, where we had Tom Baker, it was Peter Hinchcliffe, and they were really pushing it. And it's such an interesting era, even outside of Doctor Who. There was a lot of British television at this time, children's television, that was doing really dark, weird things. Shows like...
Was that when, Children of the Stones?
Yeah, Children of the Stones and The Owl Service, The Tomorrow People, these, bizarre shows that, didn't patronise children, I suppose you could put it that way, right? And weren't worried about scaring the bejesus out of kids and adults as well at that time. That does seem to have changed a bit, I think. There's a little bit more separation, I think, maybe now. In fact, maybe Doctor Who is still one of the last shows that really does that really appeals to a whole family age group.
I think so. I think it's maybe a little sad. I think that there should be things aimed at a wider family audience that are able to be frightening. Because kids like scary stuff. That was why Goosebumps was so popular. Kids like scary things.
Exactly. And they can be scared but still love it, I think. That's the thing. And you know what? We should mention part of what makes this show so scary and scared a lot of kids is that incredible theme tune, right?
Yes.
So this theme is got different variations and it has slightly changed over the years, but essentially the actual tune is still the same, right? The original theme, it was composed by Ron Grainer, but it was really realised by Delia Derbyshire, who worked at the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. It really is this incredibly innovative, ahead of its time thing, isn't it? This kind of early example of electronic music. And I believe Delia kind of did all kinds of crazy things in this workshop. She was cutting, splicing, speeding up and slowing down segments of analogue tape containing recordings of a single plucked string. She combined that with white noise. There was sort of harmonic waveforms from test tone oscillators as well. So not even musical instruments, just like random pieces of technology that she recorded and used to enhance this music. And apparently after the original composer, Ron Grainer, heard it, he was like, did I write that? Because she had messed with it so much, but she had made it so much better. There is actually a documentary about it. I think it's still available on BBC iPlayer, called Delia Derbyshire, The Myths and the Legendary Tapes, which I would recommend to anyone to watch. It's such a fascinating insight into her making that Doctor Who theme tune. That show, I mean, when anyone thinks of Doctor Who, they all know that theme tune, right? It's part of what makes this show just so unbelievably iconic.
Yeah, it's never... They've remixed it many times over the years. They've done it with like full orchestras and they put electric guitars in it, but it's never quite as effective as that first composition of it, with the really murky opening credit sequence of you don't really know what you're looking at. There's strange like waves, and some sort of smoke, possibly, and electrical. It feels like you're watching. I mean, later in the series, the opening credit sequence became, you're looking at the portal of time, but even that initial credit sequence, that does feel like what you're looking at. It feels like staring into something that you shouldn't be looking into.
Absolutely. It's sort of cosmic, right? It's like looking at this kind of strange cosmic horror, even just looking at the opening credit sequence. I love it. And I've been watching the show on, BritBox, and it always does that thing where it gives you the option, do you want to skip the intro? And I'm always like, no, I don't ever skip the intro. I love it so much. It's so good. So what I want to do now is we're going to talk through the sort of the history and the evolution of the show, I suppose, from that inception, how it changed. And a good way of doing that is to maybe track through each Doctor, right? So we'll go through each Doctor and each era. So, as we've mentioned, the first Doctor, he played the Doctor from seasons 1 to 4 from 1963 to 1966. It was the brilliant William Hartnell.
Frankly, I don't understand your attitude.
Yours leaves a lot to be desired.
Will you open the door?
There's nothing in there.
Then what are you afraid to show us?
Afraid? Oh, go away.
I think we'd better go and fetch a policeman.
Very well.
And you're coming with us?
Oh, am I? I don't think so, young man. No, I don't think so.
What do you think of William Hartnell as the first Doctor?
I think it's very interesting watching that character really evolve. In the earliest stories, he is a much more abrupt, abrasive, and kind of morally dubious character.
Almost actually quite menacing in that first episode when, who is this man who's taken this schoolgirl into this box and these teachers come, trying to help her. And he's quite terrifying.
As the series went on, they managed to work that into the ongoing arc of the Doctor of, that was him when he'd just run away from the planet and he hadn't really learned how to sort of appreciate humanity at that point, which is a sort of a clever backwards writing in a way.
Yeah.
I like William Hartnell. He's a very he's obviously not a particularly physical doctor, because he was already quite elderly when he took on the role. There are quite memorable moments where he fluffs the line and just they can't really afford to do other takes, so it just keeps rolling anyway.
Yes. It's all part of its charm, right? In those early days.
Yeah, it's there's not another actor who played the Doctor who ever really tried the same thing again.
There's a certain, William Hartnell, he played a lot of kind of drill sergeants and things like that, didn't he? He was in Carry On Sergeant and various other kind of army-based kind of comedies or dramas and that kind of thing. And he's got that quite, air of authority to him, I suppose, in a way, doesn't he?
Yes, definitely. And he does, yeah. He feels often quite harsh. The way he... we'll talk about the Dalek invasion of Earth, but the way he treats his granddaughter in that story is horrible.
Yeah.
Where she falls in love, and he's like, "Oh, okay, you're out then."
Yeah, brutal.
Just locks her up the TARDIS. I think, yeah, I like him in the role. I think you need a foundation like that to take the character in the other places that other actors took it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, like you say, to see the way in which he's evolved and the way in which they use that in the story as well. That's really interesting. So, like you said, his health was declining, right, in his sort of last days of being on the show. And in 1966, they had the first regeneration, and he was replaced by Patrick Troughton.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing. We must get some sleep and let this poor old man stay awake.
Patrick Troughton, who was age 46 when he began as the Doctor, and he was there from 1966 to 69. What do you think of Patrick Troughton?
He's a much more playful character. Mm-hmm. They give the Doctor a lot more jokes and silliness. He has there's a running gag where he plays the recorder. But that's not to say he still can be quite... He still can be very alien at that point. That's where the show, I think, starts to dabble with horror a little more. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting to see a more playful Doctor then be put in much darker stories, where he has to deal with more extreme and upsetting situations. The other interesting thing about Patrick Troughton's run was, at that point, sort of halfway through his run, they decided that the Daleks were sort of... They wanted the Daleks over. They didn't want to do them again. There was a finale for the Daleks called The Evil of the Daleks, where at the end of it, it was like, oh, they've all been destroyed. And then throughout the rest of his run, they kept trying to come up with other Daleks, and none of them are any good. There's the Dominators. That's a story where the sort of new attempt at Daleks are weird, like shuffling robots with they also have sticks, but they're just tiny, and it's just they're so unmenacing. But also in Patrick Troughton, the Cybermen really took off. As I think when you think of the Cybermen, when I think of the Cybermen, I think of Patrick Troughton's Doctor facing off against them in stories like The Moon Base and The Tomb of the Cybermen.
Yes, a lot of love for The Tomb of the Cybermen, yes. And I think you're right. I mean, it's interesting that they brought even more of that sense of kind of kookiness or quirkiness, maybe, right, with this Doctor.
I think that's what's great about seeing his Doctor face off against the Cybermen, is the Cybermen are so unemotional, and his Doctor is very emotional, and he's always like hopping about and playing the recorder, and I think that's a really good contrast that they ended up using. Yeah, absolutely.
So there you go. So Patrick Troughton from 66 to 69. Then the great John Pertwee, age 50, took over for 5 years, from 1970 to 1974.
Well, I'm a dead man. I knew that as soon as I came through that door, so you better watch out. You see, I've nothing to lose, have I? Enough! That's all! Destroy him! I want you to leave this planet while you still can.
You are bold.
Why not? I've got a machine outside that can annihilate you.
I love John Pertwee's Doctor.
Yeah.
I think this is, especially his team ups with Unit. I find them so just completely watchable. He's a little, despite he's still an older man. He's a little more of an action hero. He wears this lovely velvet suit most of the time. He has a car that he drives around, so he gets into car chases. But because it's Doctor Who, the car he's driving is a very old car that sticks out. There's a memorable story where he is chasing after a giant fly in the car, and he's trying to swat it with his cloak. It's great.
Amazing.
And this is, I guess, this is where the show feels quite Nigel Neal-esque to me. Mm-hmm. It's often sort of set in England. There's something strange happening in the countryside.
Yes. Is it John Pertwee where we get the Demons episode? That sort of very folk horror sort of one. Yeah. Yes,
the Demons is, and that's a master story. So this is where he comes in as the antagonist. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's so many good. There's so many just really compelling stories. The interesting thing about the first part of his run is the character at the end of Patrick Troughton's regeneration story, The War Games. Mm-hmm. The Doctor is put on trial by his people, the Time Lords, and condemned to exile on Earth without being able to travel. So for the first part of Third Doctor's run, he is stuck on Earth, having to deal with much more mundane issues, like having to learn how to be more of a person, which is a fun fish out of water dynamic, where he's hanging out with either Liz Shaw or Jo, which are his two companions during that part, and then also Unit and the Brigadier, who are quite stiff upper lip British military men. And it's just this very fun. It's a dynamic that the show never really does again, of turning it into almost a procedural story. Of it's the same sort of set of characters dealing with the same kind of issues every week. Like there's usually something weird happening in the British countryside, and the Doctor's got to go with his companion and the Unit people, and they're going to investigate it. And invariably, Unit will try to shoot whatever it is, and the guns won't work, and they'll be like, "Oh, bullets don't work on it," because bullets never work on the monsters. And the Doctor will save the day by doing some kind of technical wizardry and reversing the polarity of the neutron flow. Yeah, which is sort of became a catchphrase.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love that run. It's not particularly, with a couple of exceptions, it's not particularly scary, but it's just very enjoyable.
I need to check out a few more of the Pertwee ones, because I haven't seen many of them, but they all seem quite interesting. We got this comment from listener Dave Bluestein, and he said Troughton and Pertwee were great for cosmic horror, Baker and McCoy were great for gothic horror, Colin Baker was particularly good for textile based horror.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of the first anniversary special, The Three Doctors, does get strangely cosmic, and its villain is this ancient Time Lord evil called Omega, who is trapped inside a black hole. And at the story's conclusion, you realise that he doesn't even have a body anymore. It's just this suit of armor that's walking around, and that's quite. There is a cosmic horror edge to all of that.
Definitely. That's really interesting. So then after John Pertwee, he ran for 4 years there, and then from 1974 all the way to 1981 we had Tom Baker.
I'm the Doctor.
No, Doctor, I'm the Doctor, and I say that you're not fit.
You may be a doctor, but I'm the Doctor. The definite article, you might say.
Look here, Doctor, you're not fit.
Not fit. Of course I'm fit. All systems go.
Kind of, is he not like sort of the favourite Doctor from at least the classic era?
Yeah, he's sort of completely undeniable. I think when I think when the average person thinks about Doctor Who, they either think about him or they think about David Tennant.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very iconic outfit with the long scarf and the hat. But there is actually a huge amount of, because he was the Doctor for so long, there was a lot of variety in his run.
Yeah.
So you have the more gothic horror leanings, and then after that you have Douglas Adams took over as script editor, and the show leaned much more into science fiction comedy. That was especially, I think, it'd gotten too many complaints about being scary, so they hired Douglas Adams and was like, can you lighten it up a bit? And that's just what he did, for better or worse. I love Douglas Adams. I don't really love his work on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I think it was a little... It seems like they should be a good match, and maybe they weren't.
What kind of thing did Tom Baker bring to the role of the Doctor?
All of the Doctors so far have felt quite alien. Tom Baker is quite an unpredictable Doctor. He's less grounded than John Pertwee was by the end of his run. A little... He's got a very iconic voice.
He has.
That sort of quite low, deliberate way of speaking, even when he's telling a joke. There is the silliness of the jelly babies and all of that, but there's a little more of a... It makes sense that his run became quite scary, because he can be a scary Doctor to watch, I think.
Yeah. And so naturally charismatic, isn't he, as well? And like you say, it's the voice and his outfit even as well is fantastic.
I think it's the natural charisma is the reason that he was so iconic.
Yeah.
And I think once he left, the show started to struggle with holding audiences, because in the minds of a lot of the audiences, he would always be the Doctor.
Right, that's really interesting, because yes, then we've got the fifth Doctor, Pete Davison, the youngest to date, right? Age 30 when he became the Doctor, ran from 1982 to 1984.
Now, ordinary spaces, of course, show up on the architectural configuration indicators, but any good zero room is balanced to zero energy with respect to the world outside its four walls, or however many walls it has. There was a very good polygonal zero room under the Junior Senate block on Gallifrey, widely acclaimed for its healing properties. Romana's always telling me I need a holiday.
But Romana's gone, Doctor.
Gone? Really? Did she leave a note?
We said goodbye to her at the gateway. Don't you remember?
Oh, well, if we did, we did.
I've not heard much about him and his tenure, but what was he like?
He always had quite a large amount of companions. Well, not always. I think at his last few stories, he only had one. But he's sort of defined by his sort of family of companions all around him. There are a lot of stories I really like from that era. I think his Doctor is a little passive, and it becomes a problem for the show.
Right.
When his sort of earnest boyishness, I think coming off of Tom Baker being so naturally charismatic, that was the reason the show started to struggle. That was it. It changed time slots and got less viewership.
Yeah.
I do like his outfit though. The cricketer outfit with the celery it's nice.
It's very suave.
But I think the problem is it's hard to really define for me at least, I'm sure there are people who are huge fans of that era, but I struggle to really think of what a Fifth Doctor story actually is in its core identity, beyond that there are a lot of other companions there and they're probably squabbling a bit.
So then he ran until 1984. By this point, the show had been on for over 20 years. Obviously, we're up to like season 21 of the show now, when Colin Baker took over from 1984 to 1986.
Doctor?
You're expecting someone else?
I...
There's three eyes in one breath. Makes you sound a rather egotistical young lady.
What's happened?
Change, my dear. And it seems not a moment too soon.
I feel a bit bad for him, because a lot of Colin Baker stories are not particularly well written, and
Great outfit.
The outfit became a bit of a joke.
It looks a bit like Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat or something, doesn't
it? It's... And again, it's... I don't know what... I really don't know what a Sixth Doctor story is. He's... One of the first things that the Sixth Doctor does is he tries to strangle his companion.
What?
And then in his first story, he makes a pithy comment after watching two men get dissolved in a pool of acid. And it's a bit... I think the show struggles to make him likable. He's still... All of this classic run of Doctors who are still alive are actually all still playing the Doctor in audio stories from Big Finish. And I think all of them do great jobs. And the writers over at Big Finish are wonderful at being able to get a better sense of, say, the Fifth and the Sixth Doctor's characters than I think they ever got on TV.
That's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, we haven't mentioned, have we, but there are so many sort of spin-offs, I suppose, from Doctor Who. You know, the Target books, the Sarah Jane Adventures show, Torchwood, everything, audiobook, you know, everything. It's a whole universe these days, isn't it?
There was an earlier attempt at a Sarah Jane Adventure spin-off that I recommend watching just because it's very weird. It's about witches. It's called
cool.
K9 and Company. There was only one episode ever made. It's a very strange attempt at a spin-off.
Oh, interesting. And also, you know, speaking of Hammer, there were also 2 feature films, weren't there, in the 60s, starring Peter Cushing.
There were,
yes. Doctor Who and the Daleks, and the Daleks Invasion Earth 2150, right?
You know what? I completely forgot to mention that. But actually, I think those were a pretty early exposure to Doctor Who for me. Was watching both of those. They're adaptations of the 2 first Dalek stories, the Daleks and Daleks Invasion of Earth, but basically just done in Technicolor with a lot more silliness involving, custard pies.
Yeah, but like, so it's not sort of canon, right? Like, he's not one of the official Doctors, Peter Cushing.
No, he's generally, that's it's sort of thought of as another thing.
Yeah.
I don't hate those films. I think they look gorgeous, especially the first Daleks one is really like striking visually. But because they're just adaptations of TV stories, they're not generally accepted as canon.
So after Colin Baker, we had really what was the last Doctor, right, in the classic Doctor Who show before it was cancelled in 1989. So this Doctor was played by Sylvester McCoy.
I was hallucinating. I had an overwhelming sense of evil. And there was a word.
Radiation wave meter. That's what we came here for.
Oh, yes. Where do you reckon I'd keep it?
Tool room.
Won't be a jiffy. Absence makes the nose grow longer. Cretin.
The real tragedy of the show ending where it did is, I think, especially the later stories of Sylvester McCoy's run are amazing. I think they are some of the best Doctor Who stories that were ever produced. He is the closest other Doctor, I think, to William Hartnell in his sort of alienness. He plays the Doctor as a mastermind who is sort of controlling everyone, whether they want him or not. He's playing games. He's often a little more brutal, but the show was produced some just really interesting stories by the end. And I think it's sad that it was cut off before they could continue that. There was a lost season that they were starting to put together when the show was cancelled. Which I think those stories have now been adapted by the Big Finish audio people.
Oh, cool.
But it's sad that I think when that run of the show, for the first time since maybe Tom Baker, it really finds an identity, and then it was cut off before it could go deeper into that.
That's a shame.
But I love Sylvester McCoy's Doctor. He's one of my favourites.
I've heard he's one of the he's got the sort of umbrella with the sort of question mark bit on the end, right?
Yeah, the question mark umbrella question marks on his suit.
Yeah, very like the Riddler from Batman or something.
A little, yeah. And he does spin riddles, and he's often his for most of his run, his companion is Ace, who is played by Sophie Aldred, who is also one of my favorite companions. She is the show doesn't get into it, but she was very much beloved by Doctor Who's LGBT fans at the time because they read her as a lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at what her character design is like and what she wears, which is like a big jacket, and she carries around a baseball bat, you can definitely see why she was read that way.
That's really interesting, and we'll maybe talk about that a bit more actually when we talk about the revival. But the show, has the show always had a strong sort of LGBTQ sort of fan base, I suppose, in what the show does and its themes and that kind of thing?
I think so. I mean, the director of the first ever story of Doctor Who was a gay man.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always been there. The show has struggled to ever really explore it, but it has a huge amount of LGBT fans. I think the nature of having a main character who is constantly shifting identities, even if it was only until recently that the Doctor changed gender. But I think that the shifting identities did lend it to that reading. It definitely did for me when I was younger.
Yeah, and there are, as always, with any huge, property, particularly sort of sci-fi property, there are a certain amount of probably not very nice, quite toxic fans, and there is a toxic fandom probably surrounding this, as there is with Star Wars and everything else. But actually, at its heart, it seems like this has always been a show with very progressive values and that kind of thing. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I mean, I think it always had a bit of a utopian outlook. It was always a show about wanting things to be better. There are a fair amount of stories that get into quite satirical territory dealing. There's a Sylvester McCoy story called The Happiness Patrol that is very much a satire about Thatcher.
Cool.
There's a story about a Tom Baker story called The Sunmakers that's about unionization. So there is a thread that has sort of cropped up again and again in the show, even if there is a toxic fan base.
As there is with anything. Sadly.
Yeah, as with any, I guess, long-running property, it does attract a particular kind of fan, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it comes from a place, I'm sure, with most fans at least, it comes from a place of love, and sometimes that love can turn into almost ownership of a property or a text. I think that's the weird thing, and then suddenly get very angry about decisions that are made.
Yeah, I think the fact that especially the revival in 2005 was made by fans.
Yeah,
I think maybe meant other fans felt they should have more ownership over the show, and it was like, well, no, like Russell T Davies revived the show because he was a TV writer who had quite a bit of success. And he brought in a lot of gayness into especially that first series with Christopher Eccleston. There's a real, I mean, whatever you think about John Barrowman now and what he's currently up to and been doing, there's a bit where him and Christopher Eccleston's Doctor share a kiss, which is quite unprecedented, I think. And it's quite a touching moment because they kiss right as the Doctor's going to head to what he thinks is his death.
So after Sylvester McCoy, the show it was essentially cancelled, right? After from 1989, and then we get the Eighth Doctor, which you mentioned briefly earlier, Paul McGann, right? But is this an official? Because he was in like one episode, basically a pilot, right? Is that right for like a new show that?
Well, he was in it. It was a film.
It was a film, right?
A TV film, but it was made as a film. It was made to try to reboot the show with more of an American audience.
That's interesting.
Who are you?
I was dead too long this time.
The anaesthetic almost destroyed the regenerative process.
Yeah. I'm gonna get a syringe. I'm gonna take some blood. I want to know what's going on.
Grace. Don't you see? I have 13 lives.
Please. Okay, you're trying to tell me that you've come back from the dead.
Yes.
No, sorry. The dead stay dead. You can't turn back time.
Yes, you can.
I'm not a child. Don't talk to me like I'm a child. Only children believe that crap. I am a doctor.
But it was a childish dream that made you a doctor.
That it's not great, that TV movie. It tries to do a lot of digital effects that are very 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like Paul McGann as the Doctor. I think he's only appeared on screen twice, once in the TV film and then once during the show's 50th anniversary. There was a sort of prequel to the 50th anniversary episode where they basically gave him a regeneration story because his Doctor had never had a regeneration.
Oh, cool.
And I think I really like that. It's only about 20 minutes long, maybe even less, but I think it's a really nice little story.
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah, he's the first Doctor who's kind of sexy.
Yeah.
He, again, has had a real long life in playing the Doctor in audio adventures, and his Doctor appears in a lot of novels. It's interesting because it sort of gives, when they're doing those audio adventures, there's not an Eighth Doctor story template where there is with the other Doctors, so they can really push the boundaries out and be a bit stranger. I really like Paul McGann as an actor.
Yeah,
I've never not liked him when I've seen him in something. So I think it's a pity he didn't get much of a chance to appear on screen.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go. So that was Paul McGann, and then we hit the revival, the 2005 revival. So the show essentially was pretty much off the air from 1989 to 2005. And I always say to people, I wonder if this is why, for whatever reason, the show kind of passed me by. Like, I didn't grow up watching it, and I must be of that almost exact one generation that didn't grow up with any Doctor Who, because I was born in 87, so the show ended when I was 2, and then by the time it came back in 2005 I was 18, and I just don't think I was interested in watching sci-fi shows. So that exact off-air period was when I was kind of watching stuff, really, which I think is partly why the show just for whatever reason passed me by. But yeah, so it came back. Russell T Davies, as you mentioned, kind of really, even at the time, really popular television writer, Queer as Folk, all of that kind of stuff. Really interesting guy. To this day, I think still probably one of the best working TV writers, probably.
I loved his recent series. I think
it's a sin.
He's a wonderful writer. Yeah,
incredible writer. Yeah. So Russell T Davies brought back Doctor Who. And it had a slick new look, and we had a new Doctor here. So this Doctor was played by Christopher Eccleston.
You then? Who's that lot down there? I said, who are they?
They're made of plastic, living plastic creatures. And they're being controlled by a relay device on the roof, which would be a great big problem if I didn't have this. So, I'm going to go upstairs and blow it up.
And I might well die in the process, but don't worry about me, no. You go on. Go and have your lovely beans on toast. Don't tell anyone about this, because if you do, you'll get them killed. I'm the Doctor, by the way. What's your name?
Rose.
Nice to meet you, Rose. Run for your life.
His one series as the Doctor, I always rewatch. I think it's pretty much perfect. Despite some of the side characters maybe feeling a little unsavory to watch now, because of stuff we know about the actors.
Right.
I think that the writing really works. I think it's pretty much the best reboot that a show like Doctor Who could ask for, in that it brings the show into the modern day, but it doesn't lose the core of what it's trying to do. I think this was probably what people were scared about at the time, was they're like, oh, but new Doctor Who, what's it going to look like? Is it going to be more? Is it going to be too sexy? Is it going to be too slick? And I think it is. It's sexy and it is slick, but it's not. It doesn't lose itself in that. It's still, about a weird guy in a blue box, sort of stumbling into situations.
Yeah, it's a good balance, isn't it? Because it obviously it is now, we're post X-Files, we're post Buffy, we're post a lot of these really slick, popular, particularly American shows.
Yeah, it feels a little Buffy in its construction, and it's like there's one episode, there's a problem, we're going to deal with this story, and then we're going to move right on to the next one. It's not like old Doctor Who where the stories would take, I don't know, sometimes 6 to 12 episodes to go through them. The most this one gets through is like a 2-episode story arc. When there's a really big problem to deal with.
Yeah, that's right. That's something we didn't really say, did we? But the previous, until this point, the show was split up into more sort of stories than episodes, because each story was like a serial in itself of like 4, 5, like you say, sometimes 6 episodes, right? Whereas it goes to the very kind of popular television kind of format of an episode a week, a story a week, I suppose, right?
Yeah, which, wouldn't have been sustainable to do the old model in the modern day. But I think that first Christopher Eccleston series I really love. There's so many classics in it. There's like The Empty Child is probably the most enduring classic from that era, but there's a lot of very good stories. And then it's a little more satirical than I think I appreciated at the time. There's some criticisms of Tony Blair going on in the Aliens of London story and stuff like that. So like it still retains its sort of political bent.
And what do you think of Eccleston himself as the Doctor for just this one season? What do you think of him?
I really like Eccleston as the Doctor because it reverts back to the Doctor as more of an alien, more of a troubled person, because the real genius idea that Davies comes up with is, what if the Doctor's like people have died in the time that the show has been off air? A horrible thing called the Time War happened, and all of the Time Lords died, and he thinks all of the Daleks died, and then he finds out that that's not the case, and that's a really wonderful bit of acting from him in that story, where he realizes that his people were wiped out for nothing, and the Daleks are still around, and he's completely alone. And then throughout that course of that series, he learns to be a person again. He learns to, with like being around Rose, I think, there is a little flirtation there, but it's also just, she reminds him why he started doing this whole thing in the first place, why he started helping people. I think Christopher Eccleston is a very talented actor, and I think he's really good in that role.
So Christopher Eccleston only did one season, and one season only, and then regenerated into the one and only David Tennant, who played the Doctor for 5 years, from 2005 to 2010, and as you mentioned, arguably one of the most iconic portrayals of the Doctor.
And we never stopped, did we? All across the universe. Running. And at one time we had to hop. Do you remember? Hopping for our lives. Yeah? All that hopping. Remember hopping for your life? Yeah? Hop. Were there? No?
Can you change back?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Oh.
Can you?
No. Do you want to leave?
Do you want me to leave?
No, but your choice. If you want to go home.
I'm probably unusual in that I don't love what he does with the Doctor. I think it's very mopey. He's a very mopey Doctor. Especially during his last couple of stories, the show becomes about how emotional he is and how sad he is that he's going to die, and I don't find that compelling at all. But I can see why. This for this period, Doctor Who became pretty much the biggest thing on TV in the UK. And one of our biggest exports. It was huge, and I can see why what it was about his Doctor that appealed to that. And then, don't get me wrong, I think he's really good in the role at points, and there are some stories that I adore. that he is the Doctor in. But I'm just a little. I think especially that last couple of stories, his regeneration story is just a little bit too much.
Yeah. Fair enough.
His regeneration itself takes like, I don't know, half an hour. It's really long.
And he has a couple of different companions, right, during his era. There's Catherine Tate, right, as well as Billy Piper, and is there another?
Yeah, so Billy Piper, Freema Agyeman, is Martha, who I think the show does very dirty, because the whole point of her series is that the Doctor is still in love with Rose and can't get over Rose.
Yeah.
And so you just end up feeling a bit like, well, let Martha be a character.
Yeah.
She's the first black companion that Doctor Who has ever had, and the show is still hung up on the previous companion. But Catherine Tate I remember when she was announced as being the next companion, I was like, oh no. But she actually does a really good job.
Catherine Tate was so famous at this point in time as well for being like the catchphrase like sketch queen. Wasn't she?
And very much not famous for being a dramatic actress. But she does actually pull off some really good moments. But yeah, it's sort of he goes through a couple of different companions. Sort of one a series, and then during his last, because the show was so huge, it took a year off having a series, but they were like, oh, but we're going to do like mini films for the TV.
Yes.
Each with like a huge budget. And he didn't have a companion. Each of them had sort of a special extra companion.
Because the kind of the Doctor Who sort of Christmas specials really became a thing, right? As well at this point in time.
Oh yeah, that was the other like genius idea that Rusty Avery's had, was to make the Christmas specials as much part of the show's identity as its normal series. And I think those episodes were watched by people who didn't normally watch the series, because it was just like, well, this is like appointment viewing on Christmas.
Yeah.
Tune in, watch a Christmas tree try to kill someone.
Yeah, my girlfriend is a massive Doctor Who fan, and she said it was her tradition to like tell her family to just shut the fuck up for an hour while she watched the Doctor Who Christmas special.
Yeah, I remember we would. It would be like, oh no, well we have to. My grandparents would come over for Christmas, and then they would leave right before 6, so we could also watch Doctor Who, because we had to watch it when it was on. Like it didn't. We had to know what was going to happen.
Absolutely. Very important, yeah.
Yeah.
So then we go from David Tennant to Matt Smith, the youngest Doctor, right, ever in the history of the show, 27 years old when he became the next Doctor. This is also when the show sort of changed in terms of its showrunner. Russell T Davies stepped back from the show, and Stephen Moffat kind of took over at this point. So the show changes up a little bit.
Funny.
Am I? Good. Funny's good. What's your name?
Amelia Pond.
Oh, that's a brilliant name. Amelia Pond. Like a name in a fairy tale. Oh, in Scotland, Amelia.
No, I had to move to England. It's rubbish.
So what about your mum and dad, then? They're upstairs. Thought we'd have woken them by now.
Don't have a mum and dad. Just an aunt.
I don't even have an aunt.
You're lucky.
I know.
I'm not scared.
Of course you're not. You're not scared of anything. Box falls out of the sky, man falls out of a box, man eats fish custard. And look at you. Just sitting there.
Alison, what do you think of the Matt Smith era of Doctor Who?
Well, this is me continuing my maybe controversial ideas. I think that Matt Smith's first season is really strong. I think the show, there's some great scary stories in that first series, and then it gets a little off the rails as he goes on. I think he gets a bit too showy, and his Doctor is kind of unlikable in a way where it doesn't really grapple with. When you're watching it, you'll be wondering, does the show know that he's being unlikable right now? I think the show sort of struggles, which is a pity, because it was on top of it was the biggest thing in the world when he took over.
Yeah.
And it's not really his fault, but it does there's not a huge amount of like horror stories from this run either. Apart from like some notable ones, there's not. The show doesn't really have a. It takes on this very it's whizzing around the universe. It's very, very fast paced, but it doesn't take the time to stop and be a bit spooky. Where I think it probably should.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what is it about Stephen Moffat then? Because I've heard that he's slightly more controversial, slightly more divisive, I suppose, in terms of his tenure as being in charge of the show.
Stephen Moffat is a very clever writer, a capital C clever. I don't know if you watched his Dracula.
Yeah, I didn't love it.
That's what his Doctor Who feels like often,
right?
At its worst.
Okay.
It feels like that. It's often someone standing and explaining why they're very clever. Yeah, I think that the 11th Doctor's run is just a little bit too full of itself, which is a pity. But I do think that the first series with him and Karen Gillan as Amy, and I can't remember the actor who plays Rory, but Rory, I think that dynamic is really fun, and it's quite a different dynamic having the Doctor and then this young married couple also in the TARDIS.
Yeah.
And it also leads to some really there's a wonderful story called Amy's Choice, where Amy they sort of become trapped in a dream where Amy's dreaming that she's married. She's finally gone married to her husband and she's pregnant, but then her husband is killed and she's having to deal with that. And it's a really good story, that one.
Okay, so I mean, it's really interesting as well, I think, the choice they made. So Matt Smith, youngest Doctor, 2010 to 2013. And then from 2014, we've got Peter Capaldi. Quite different, right? In contrast to Matt Smith.
This is not a war. I fought in a bigger war than you will ever know. I did worse things than you could ever imagine. And when I close my eyes, I hear more screams than anyone could ever be able to count. And you know what you do with all that pain? Shall I tell you where you put it? You hold it tight till it burns your hand. And you say this: no one else will ever have to live like this. No one else will ever have to feel this pain. Not on my watch.
Age 55 when he became the Doctor. What do you think of Peter Capaldi's Doctor?
So this is my real out there opinion. I think this is one of the best runs the show has ever had.
Wow.
I think Stephen Moffat is still writing at this point, but for whatever reason, having Capaldi there, I think, tempers him a little bit and makes his writing a lot more reflective.
Mm-hmm.
And Capaldi he's just such a magnetic screen presence. I love looking at him. I think he's like such a, innately talented actor. And I think this is his free series as the Doctor. I could watch them endlessly. I love them.
Interesting. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, I don't know. I've heard differing opinions on Capaldi's phase, but sounds like there's some interesting stories.
It's also because the show was losing viewership at this point, and its budget really got slashed, which ends up, I think, pushing them to be a little bit more inventive with the stories they're telling.
Yes.
So even if the visuals aren't quite what they were during Matt Smith's early run, you end up having these much smaller, more contemplative stories. And when Peter Capaldi does a speech, he can sell it.
Yeah.
Because it's Peter Capaldi.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so that was Peter Capaldi, and then so we're now up to the 13th Doctor, the most recent Doctor. Again, for some reason, this was a controversial casting choice, wasn't it? But Jodie Whittaker, the first female, finally, Doctor on the history of the show.
Hold on there, please, madam. I need you to do as I say. This could be a potential crime.
Why are you calling me
madam?
Because you're a woman?
Am I?
Does it suit me?
What? Oh, yeah. I remember Sorry, half an hour ago I was a white-haired Scotsman. When's the next train due?
This is the last one back.
But the doors are locked. How did you both get in?
Driver's window was smashed in.
What's your name?
PC Khan, Hallamshire Police.
Name, not title.
Yasmin Khan. Yaz to my friends. Can I have your name, please?
When I can remember it.
You don't know your own name?
Of course I know it. Just can't remember it. It's right there on the tip of my... What's that? Tongue. Smart boy. Biology. What did you...
I think she's really good as the Doctor. I don't love where the writing currently is.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit undercooked for me. And again, there's been like no scary stories.
I know. I watched the New Year's one last year. The what was it called? Something of the Daleks. The
Revolution of the Daleks.
Yeah, the Revolution of the Daleks. I thought it sounded quite cool, and I watched the trailers, and I was like, oh, I'm going to give this a watch, because I hadn't really seen Jodie Whittaker's Doctor yet, and I was like, oh, yeah, and I agree with you. I think she seems really good, but I just wish that maybe the writing was a bit better. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a real veteran. It's Chris Chibnall who wrote and created Broadchurch.
Oh yeah.
Which is, that's a good show.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know for whatever reason, it hasn't been working for me, which is a pity, because I think Jodie's great.
Yes, indeed.
And I love that there is a female Doctor. It's just, I don't know, it feels like she's maybe being underserved a bit. And I hope that doesn't mean that when there's a recasting that they'll go back to a safer territory of just a white man.
Yeah, I know. I wonder. That was going to be my last question for you in terms of the Doctors. Do you have a prediction, or do you have a favourite in mind for who they could cast next after Jodie?
No, I don't really know. I mean, I'd like them to keep the show being diverse. I'd kind of like a punkier Doctor. Because Jodie Whittaker's very earnest, but she's not very. I'd like a kind of punky Doctor, but I don't know. There's not really any actor who stands out to me currently. So maybe just an unknown. Maybe that would be better.
Yeah, there's been already a lot of articles about it, hasn't there? I've seen people, suggesting Michaela Cole, which would be cool, but also people like Riz Ahmed, Ollie, what's his name? Ollie Alexander from Years and Years, and from the TV show It's a Sin as well. A lot of people sort of seem to be backing him as well as a potential future Doctor, but who knows, I suppose, at this point.
Yeah, who knows?
Hello everybody, just interrupting the Doctor Who extravaganza momentarily to thank this week's sponsor. That's $20 Patreon subscriber David Emerson, all the way over in Australia. Thank you so much to David, and I'm going to read this little message that David sent to me. He says, the main reason I signed up for this is on behalf of my girlfriend Eloise Plant, who is having her 26th birthday on the 26th of July. Oh my God, happy birthday, Eloise. That was, a few days ago at this point when this episode is out. So a very happy birthday, Eloise. I hope you had an awesome day. David says, Eloise is a huge fan of horror. She wrongly finds Scream to be the pinnacle of the genre. I'm sure it's only because she hasn't yet seen The Thing. It's been great fun watching horror movies, listening along to the podcast, and then arguing about the movies. So thank you for facilitating that. Well, thank you, David, for sending me that lovely message. And I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, Scream is up there. Scream is in the pinnacle of the genre as far as I'm concerned as well, so I agree with Eloise. But one more time, a huge happy birthday to Eloise Plant, and a huge thank you to these sponsors, and I'm going to thank them both as sponsors, seeing as David has done this for her. So a big thank you to this week's sponsors, David Emerson and Eloise Plant. And don't forget, if you want to sign up at a $20 level to become an official Evolution of Horror sponsor, you can drop me a little message which I can then read out in your own little segment here on the main podcast. You can call out your loved one, friend, family member. You can call out a blog, your own podcast if you want to plug that. Anything you like. If you are a $20 Patreon subscriber, I'll basically say anything you want me to. So to get involved, just head on over to patreon.com/evolution of horror. That's patreon.com/evolution of horror. Okay, let's continue with the second half of this week's discussion as me and Alison continue exploring Doctor Who, and we are going to list some of the best and scariest ever episodes of this iconic show. So, there we go. We've kind of ran through the brief history of the show and all of those doctors. I think we did a good job there, Alison. And now what I want to do in the second half of this discussion is whiz through some of our favourite episodes. I gave you the impossible task. I was like, Alison, could you come up with a list of around 10 episodes in the entire history of this show that kind of tick the horror boxes as well as being some of your favourites? So you've come up with a great list, and I've got a few. I put the word out on social media, and I had quite a lot of replies from people talking about their favourites or their scariest episodes. So I'll read some comments as well as we go. So are you ready to do this, Alison? Should we rattle through your list? So the first episode here that we've got on our list is from season 2, William Hartnell, Dalek Invasion of Earth.
The year is 2000. The place, London. The invasion of the Daleks has begun. Their plan, to destroy all Earthmen.
Which was first broadcast on the 21st of November, 1964. What's this one about?
This is the second story with the Daleks. Daleks really took off as a pop cultural idea at this point. So it's bigger and it's more. It's like a blockbuster compared to the original Dalek story. It is a bit silly. The Dalek flying saucers are very Plan 9 from outer space.
Amazing.
Like you can very much see the strings. But basically the TARDIS arrives on Earth in the nearish future, only to find that the Daleks have invaded Earth and subjugated the population. And they have a plan to drop a bomb into the Earth's core, explode it, and then put a giant engine inside the Earth's core and drive the Earth around like a spaceship.
Amazing. I love it.
There's never really a reason given for why they want to do this beyond that. It seems like, it's a bit evil, isn't it?
Yeah, it's bad, isn't it? Yeah. Tell me, we should take a moment to talk a bit about the Daleks, I suppose, because we've mentioned them already a few times. Again, probably people, when they think of Doctor Who, they often probably think of the Daleks, and these are the monsters, I suppose, that really terrified a whole generation of kids as well. And they look kind of silly, don't they? These weird kind of, vacuum things with plungers sticking out of them and everything, but what is it about the Daleks, do you think, that became just so iconic and so sort of timeless?
I think a lot of it comes down to the voice.
Yeah.
They have a wonderful voice.
You will follow me, both of you. Do not try to escape, or you will be exterminated.
It's almost like it's metallic screaming.
Yeah.
And the idea of them, the idea that they're these creatures that were so filled with hate that they completely regressed and turned into tiny like squids and then stuck themselves in metal machines that they could drive around and continue being horrible in.
Yeah. I
think there's a reason it's a simple design. And it's endured because it's a simple design that kids can draw in their school books, and that they can, you can play Daleks. You can stick your arms out in their to like be their plunger and their gun.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can shout. They do an impression of them shouting across the school playground. And also they're a metaphor, but they're not a subtle metaphor, but they are very much a metaphor for Nazism, which was people found it quite shocking when they were first on screen, seeing something that obviously is standard for Nazism sort of in front of them.
And what exactly is the deal with Daleks? Is it like an alien creature that's inside the thing that we see moving around?
Yeah, so there was basically a race of people who were at war with another race of people, and they were basically mutated by nuclear radiation until they were hid inside these machines to keep them alive. So that's kind of the deal, is that there's these little creatures inside of them driving them around.
Nice.
There's a great... the one bit I do really like from some of the recent series is in one of the Dalek stories, there's a bit where the Dalek is out of its casing and it attaches itself to a woman and drives her around like its casing, and it's really good.
Oh, wow.
And it's really, like, gnarly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a cool idea.
So there you go. So that was one of the earliest kind of big Dalek stories, Dalek Invasion of Earth, Season 2, Serial 2. Let's go on to the next on your list. Now, this is one that a lot of people have actually brought up. Tomb of the Cybermen from Series 5. This was Patrick Troughton, Doctor, first broadcast on the 2nd of September 1967.
Let me go! I set you free! It was our plan! You belong to us. You shall be like us.
Actually, Kevin Lyons, friend of this podcast, Kevin Lyons wrote in to say, I can still remember being traumatized by Tomb of the Cybermen when I was a little kid. It's probably the day I became a horror fan. And a lot of people kind of said similar sorts of things. This was one of their sort of real gateways into horror, the Cybermen. What do you think of this one, Alison?
There is... I like this... There's a little... There's a little bit of racism in the story that's kind of unfortunate. That's the case in some older episodes. But I imagine what everyone is thinking about when they think about Tomb of the Cybermen is the sequence when the Cybermen leave their tombs, which is it's wonderful. There's this amazing music playing. They're basically all they're doing is just pulling apart a bit of cling film and stepping through, but it really works.
Amazing.
And their voices are so cold, and the cyber leader has a sort of bulging head where you can see his brain. It's a good story. I can see exactly why so many people wrote in about it.
Interesting. So that's really cool. Tomb of the Cybermen. Now we're going to jump to another episode in the same season, I believe, season 5, The Web of Fear. Another Patrick Troughton episode, first broadcast in February 1968. It's that scary music that was used in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. So straight away, that makes me scared. But Alison, tell us about The Web of Fear.
I always remember my dad talking about this one, talking about they were Yeti in the underground. And before I'd seen it, I was like, why were there Yeti in the underground? That's not where Yeti go.
Yeah.
So it's a sequel to another Patrick Troughton story called The Abominable Snowman, which is a story about a sort of cosmic horror entity that is using robotic yetis for malicious purposes. And then in this one, that cosmic horror entity is in London, and it's using the yetis again for some reason in the underground. They're shooting a strange web that is filling up the underground and ensnaring people. No, that as a concept, it doesn't make any sense. But that's unfortunately a fair amount of the story is missing. But it is, I think they have animated the missing episode, so it is possible to watch the entire story with the original soundtrack and just animated.
That's really cool.
Visuals, and it is very scary. It's the first appearance of the Brigadier. Before he's the leader of unit, he's just sort of a military guy who's a bit in over his head, trying to deal with this absurd problem. And it's creepy seeing these giant hulking furry things move down the London Underground tunnels.
Yes,
it's a really good image.
Sounds almost a bit Quatermass and the Pit, that kind of London Underground monster as well.
Yeah, I think it may be. I wonder if it was. Yeah, it is a little.
Yeah, it came out after that film came out, so yeah, maybe. So that was The Web of Fear. Then we're going to jump to season 7 to 1970. This is John Pertwee year. Inferno.
What's happened to everyone round here? Have you all gone mad? What are you doing in that ridiculous get-up?
Put your hands up.
All right, Liz, a joke's a joke.
Get back!
This story is very, very good. This is probably one of my favourites in the entire show's run. It's quite long. It's about 7 episodes long, I think. But it's got this sort of... Later on in the show, especially in the reboot, the show will deal with things like parallel universes. But it had never dealt with that up to this point, and it was... So the setup is... there is a drilling project that environmental groups are very worried about. Through an accident, the Doctor ends up in a parallel universe where the drilling project is much further along. This parallel universe, it appears that fascists are in control of the UK. The Brigadier is there, but he has an eye patch. And the drilling project is causing these horrible mutations and earthquakes. And so the Doctor has to try and deal with saving the Earth in this parallel world, and then also deal with it saving it in our world. And it's a very mature story for the time. Mm-hmm. It's very prescient in a lot of ways. It's just really good. I don't know. I really love it.
Oh, that's great. And you know, we've got a few while we're on the sort of John Pertwee era. I've got a few other episode suggestions from people from this sort of time. Joe Bear has named Doctor Who and the Green Death, where the Doctor investigates a South Wales mine where waste from an oil plant has killed miners and made maggots grow to giant size.
The maggots are so good.
Oh, that sounds creepy.
It's a really quite impressive little practical effect that they did to build the maggots. They're very gross.
Very cool. Sarah Wilkinson mentioned the John Pertwee episode The Demons, involving Morris men dancing around a maypole and strangling people. Very scary when you're around 7 years old, she said. Yeah, I actually watched this one because I've got such a love for folk horror, so I had to check it out, and I really enjoyed this one. It was great.
Yeah, that one's a lot of fun.
Really fun.
I think that's one of the ones where the Master's in it, and he just has one of the silliest monikers that's so... I think it's just the Master in Latin, maybe, or I don't know. He's playing a vicar.
That's right. Yes. An evil vicar.
That one's a lot of fun. Yes,
really good. Guy Threpwood, and actually a few different people have mentioned this one. The Terror of the Autons, and he's just put terrifying baby monsters.
John, are you all right? John?
Somebody sent me a YouTube clip of just that weird baby monster thing just leaping at somebody's neck. I was like, what the hell is this? This is the absolute stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, that's also... I think the Autons are in a carnival, so you get some lovely creepy carnival stuff in that one.
Yeah, very creepy. I really liked the look of that one. I need to watch that one properly, but it looked good. Yeah. So a lot of love actually from this kind of John Pertwee era. But let's move on to the next one on your list, which is a Tom Baker one. So we're jumping to 1976 to The Brain of Morbius.
Your puny mind is powerless against the strength of Morbius. Back to your beginning.
So this is basically Doctor Who does Frankenstein.
Amazing.
It's very grim and violent, but it's also very campy. It's basically about a Morbius, who is another renegade Time Lord like the Doctor, but he's evil, and he's trying to get someone to build a body for him so he can live again. and it's just sort of very visually arresting and a bit gross, and there's a little bit of body horror in it.
Yeah, I think I've seen a bit of this one, and it really does have, like we mentioned earlier, it has a kind of gothic sort of Hammer horror vibe. This one, and just in the way it looks.
There's constant storms and thunder and lightning happening.
Yeah. Very cool. And this is, I suppose, like we talked about earlier in our discussion, we're in that era, right? That sort of gothic horror era of the show. The sort of Philip Hinchcliffe sort of era of the show at this point, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. So that's The Brain of Morbius from 1976. We're going to go to another Tom Baker one next on your list here from 1977 called The Robots of Death.
Please identify yourselves.
Well, I'm the Doctor. And that's Leela. I wondered if it's possible for us to speak to the person in charge. I'd like to thank him for saving our lives.
What are you doing here?
Well, the other mechanical man told us to wait.
What were you doing in the scoop?
Trying to get out.
Please wait here.
This one is about a humans on a mining vessel that is mining sand on an alien planet. And the vessel is staffed by these wonderful gold robots with these molded faces. But then people start to die, and the robots seem to be mysteriously killing people. But that's not part of their programming. Surely they shouldn't be able to kill people. It's a great little murder mystery with the robots are very iconic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at them, it's a good design, and it's also there's a lot of spooky sci-fi horror about murderous robots, and I think this is one of the first ones that really gets at what is scary about the idea of robots, which is that they look kind of like people. You know, they have human. If you give them human faces, but they're unmoving and not quite there, then it can be really frightening.
Yeah, very uncanny. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. So that's The Robots of Death. Now, before we move on to the next one on your list, I'll read a few, because obviously this is exactly the era where everybody wrote in to suggest their favourites from this kind of era, the Tom Baker sort of gothic horror era. Jules Boyle, along with many other people, mentioned Pyramids of Mars. What do you think of Pyramids of Mars?
Pyramids of Mars it's a lot of fun. It's a Sarah Jane story with there's a little bit of cosmic horror going on in the villain, who is an Egyptian god. Who is also, from Mars.
A couple of people have mentioned The Talons of Wang Chang. I've not seen this one, but isn't this one of the ones that's kind of really hideously dated, though, in terms of...
It is. It's very... There's some scary bits in it, and some really good costuming, I remember, and the sort of a nice, Victorian London atmosphere, but it's very racist, yeah, it's not aged well at all, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's maybe worth checking out if you're okay with dealing with that, but it's a little, it leaves a bad taste in the mouth, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you've got as long as you're aware of the context, I suppose, and you're okay with that. It's got some dodgy old racist depictions in it, but a lot of people have mentioned that it's actually otherwise quite an impressive episode. Ollie Menham said, although Talon suffers from the most ludicrous giant rat ever filmed, and sadly dated.
The giant rat is not very good.
and he says, and of course it's dated in other not so fun ways, it's still a cracking script. So there you go. That was The Talons of Wang Chang. Joseph Bromley said, I'd say my favourite creepy classic is Seeds of Doom, which would fit amazingly well in this season. A kind of hybrid of The Thing meets Day of the Triffids. Yes, I have actually checked this one out as well. It feels very The Thing, doesn't it, this one?
It does, yeah. I mean, the opening stretch, which is in the Arctic, and... Yeah, this was one of the ones that Mary Whitehouse very much took
against.
There is to sort of be vague enough to not spoil it. There is a death involving a sort of... There's a proto-Fargo death.
Yes.
That's a lot of fun. I like that one.
It's very cool. Marcus Love has named The Ark in Space. He said that one has got a good bit of body horror in it.
Yeah, it's a little bit alien. I wonder if Ridley Scott had seen it. He might well have.
Yeah.
The effects are very, very bad in this one. There's an enduring image of this creature crawling across the floor that's meant to be quite menacing, but it's bubble wrap filled with green food coloring.
Amazing.
But it's quite got some sort of body horror going on. It's about this humans in this ark and start floating above the earth, and they're slowly getting taken over by these bugs. It's nice. If you can deal with some less than stellar effects, it's really fun. And I think it's sort of the story where Tom Baker first really starts giving it his all.
Nice. Very cool. Stephen Last has mentioned also Pyramids of Mars. He said one of the best Tom Bakers and has a real Hammer feel to it. He's also said Curse of Fenric scared the crap out of me when it first aired. Ian Maynard says, for me it was a Tom Baker story, The Horror of Fang Rock. He said, it's my earliest memory of Doctor Who. I was 4 at the time, but can still vividly remember being terrified by it. Such creepy atmosphere. From then on, I was a fan of the programme, and it started my love of horror. And then a few people have also said Genesis of the Daleks and Davros specifically.
This is Davros. Elite Unit 7 will go to the incubator room. All survival maintenance systems are to be closed down. The Dalek creatures are to be destroyed.
Tell them the order cannot be countermanded.
This order cannot. This is Davros. This is Davros. My last order is cancelled. Repeat, cancelled. No action is to be taken.
What do you want done with this?
For the moment, he must be kept alive. He has knowledge that is vital to our future, and I will drain every last detail of it from his mind, and then he will learn the true meaning of pain.
Well, he was the man who made the Daleks. He was the one who sort of pushed the genetic mutation and came up with the casing. I think it's maybe he's appeared a couple of times. This is the story where he's best.
Yeah.
The makeup's really good. It's wonderful, and like his face is sort of drooping, and you can see he's just screaming. His voice is not quite a Dalek's voice, but it has a bit of it.
Yeah, really, really creepy. I've seen that. At least I've seen the clip of Davros, and there's some creepy stuff there. So there we go. Let's move on to your next pick. Actually, I think somebody already just mentioned this one, but your next pick from the Sylvester McCoy years, 1989, The Curse of Fenric, right?
This is, I think it's maybe the second to last story that aired. And it's just really strange and sad.
What's happened? The wolves of Fenric, descendants of the Viking who first buried the flask. The baby. In 30 years, the baby will be grown. She will have a daughter. That daughter will be you. You've just created your own future.
I really like it, but it's quite a hard story to describe. It's got Norse gods in it. There's Nazis and all stuff about Ace's family trauma, and it's quite a mature story. I mean, I think the thing that really defines that era, the latest Sylvester McCoy era, is how, because the kids weren't really watching the show anymore, so they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll just make a show a bit for adults then.
Yeah.
And I think when it's at its best, it produces something like The Curse of Fenric.
Nice. Amazing. So there you go. And now for your next pick, we're moving into the revival era then. So the first one you've got here is from the Christopher Eccleston years, the two-parter, The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances, right?
I'm here now. Can't you see me?
I sent it to its room. This is its room.
Are you my mummy?
Yeah, so this was the first story for the revival that Stephen Moffat wrote. It was sort of his calling card. It's really good. I don't know. This was, I think, the first, like the gas mask dummies. I can't remember if that was what they were termed of, but the gas masks are just a really creepy idea. There's a wonderful bit where someone is coughing and then the gas mask starts to appear. It's pushing itself out of their throat. And it's so weird and nasty. It's also a very heartfelt story that ends very nicely, but it gets quite scary. I remember after it, all the kids around school were just going, "Are you my mummy? Are you my mummy?" And it was quite, it's an upsetting story, just having the through line of the story be this child constantly asking that.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Okay, so that was the Doctor, the Empty Child, rather, and the Doctor Dances from 2005. We're going to jump a season later to David Tennant years now, and you've got here The Impossible Planet and The Satan Pit, right, from 2006.
I shall never die. The thought of me is forever in the bleeding hearts of men, in their vanity and obsession and lust. Nothing shall ever destroy me. Nothing.
Go to hell.
Yeah, this is a little bit of cosmic horror and a little bit of occult horror. There's a station on an asteroid that is impossibly orbiting a black hole, and then there start to be demonic possessions happening, and the literal devil appears. the devil from Christianity. It's really good. It's a good. I guess we haven't really talked about it, but the concept of the base under siege story is something that Doctor Who did a lot, especially in the Patrick Troughton era. But this is a return to that. Like there's a base, it's under siege by some malevolent force. There's a group of side characters who are just for the story, who are slowly being picked off one by one.
Love it. That sounds like my jam. I'm going to check that one out. That's great. Next up, from a year later, 2007, another David Tennant one, Human Nature and the Family of Blood.
He never raised his voice. That was the worst thing. The fury of the Time Lord. And then we discovered why. Why this Doctor, who had fought with gods and demons, why he'd run away from us and hidden. He was being kind. He wrapped my father in unbreakable chains forged in the heart of a dwarf star. He tricked my mother into the event horizon of a collapsing galaxy to be imprisoned there forever.
So this one has a very strange setup, where there's these mysterious figures who have been hunting the Doctor because they want his regenerations. So he uses a device that basically wipes his memory and rewrites his genetic code to make him into a human. And so it's basically following the Doctor as this. He's a teacher at a school pre-World War One. This family they're called the Family of Blood, which are these really creepy collection of people who are trying to work out who because they know the Doctor is in this area, but they don't know who the Doctor is. They've never seen him, and he doesn't know who he is either because he thinks he's a human. And it's just this sort of it's probably David Tennant's best performance as the Doctor, even though he's not really playing the Doctor in it at all. He's playing a man who the Doctor has sort of made out of nothing, and it's really it's also quite the Family of Blood are really scary.
Interesting. That sounds really interesting. Okay, so that's Human Nature and the Family of Blood. That's from season 3 of the revival from 2007. All right. Well, next, I mean, this is the one that I can't believe it's taken us this long to mention it. But next, we're going to talk about Blink.
Yes, they're coming. The angels are coming for you. But listen, your life could depend on this. Don't blink. Don't even blink. Blink and you're dead. They are fast, faster than you could believe. Don't turn your back. Don't look away, and don't blink. Good luck.
I mean, what is there we can say about this one, probably, Alison, that hasn't already been said, right?
It's Blink.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's one of the most famous episodes of this story. I feel like people who haven't even seen Doctor Who have probably watched Blink.
Absolutely. I think I watched Blink before I watched most other Doctor Who, because somebody showed it to me just as a horror fan and said, just watch this hour of television. And it's so good, isn't it? It's like
it is really good.
It's like this brilliant little standalone story with a really cool concept and really creepy, simple but creepy monsters as well.
Yeah, they were because the fun thing about it is it was kind of they needed an extra episode to fill the gap. So they were Stephen Moffat was basically said, can you write a really low budget episode where the Doctor and the Companion aren't in it much because it's they need a break.
Mm-hmm.
So just a really low budget one without the Doctor and the Companion in it much. And then he ended up just producing a widely received classic.
That's so funny, isn't it, as well, that one of the most popular episodes of Doctor Who is the one that actually barely has a Doctor or Companion in it as well. But it's just a really good little horror story, I think.
It is. The angels are scary. I remember that this was after the point where I was usually scared by Doctor Who because I was a little bit older at this point.
Yes.
But the angels were scary. There was a cemetery fairly near my house, and there were stone angels in that cemetery.
Oh my God, it's creepy. And so it's been a while since I've seen it, but isn't it right that if you stop looking at them, or if you blink, or if you turn away from them, they move towards you, right? But then they're always still when you're looking at them again. Is that right?
Yes, and they're so fast that in a blink they can, get across the room and get to you. And then they will, rather than just killing you outright, when they touch you, they just take you out of time. And you'll end up being stuck somewhere with no one else and you'll have to live your life there, which is just a really sad fate to happen to you.
Yeah, horrible. It's such a good episode of television. It's really good. And, performance from at the time, pretty unknown Carey Mulligan, right? Who stars in this one.
Who ended up a Hollywood actress now.
Yeah, exactly. She's a big deal now. So there you go. A fantastic episode. That's Blink from 2007. Oh, another great one next as well that a lot of people have mentioned. An episode called Midnight.
My name's the Doctor.
My name's the Doctor.
Okay, can you stop?
Okay, can you stop?
I'd like you to stop.
I'd like you to stop.
Why is she doing that?
Why is she doing that?
She's gone mad.
She's gone mad.
Stop it.
Stop it.
I said stop it.
I said stop it.
I don't think she can.
I don't think she
All
can.
right, now stop it. This isn't
All right,
funny.
now stop it. This isn't funny. Shh. All of you.
My name's Jethro.
My name's Jethro.
Jethro, leave it. Just shut
Jethro,
up.
leave it. Just shut up.
Why are you repeating?
Why are you repeating?
What is that, learning?
What is that, learning?
Copying?
Copying?
Absorbing?
Absorbing?
This is a great one as well, isn't it, Alison?
It's really, it's a bottle episode in that it mostly takes place inside the same room. It's the Doctor on his own. His companion is taking a break, using a sun tanning in a luxury facility, and the Doctor's on going on a little trip to try and see something, but something goes wrong, and there's something stalking the outside of the vehicle, and then it gets inside, and it's just this. It's really nasty. It's about in a crisis, people, rather than coming together, people turning against each other, and turning against the outsider in the situation, who is the Doctor. So
it's got a really cool. It is a kind of base under siege almost, isn't it? Again, story, but almost with the threat being sort of within. Inside rather than outside, almost, and a good sort of paranoia story.
The great, children's playground game of the repeating. Yeah, so you'll say something and then the monster will repeat it back to you without explanation. and it's just it's
there's a really chilling moment, isn't there? Not to spoil it too much, but where that mimicking gets so quick that soon they end up speaking at the same time, and then
it gives me goosebumps.
And then it flips, and the monster starts talking before the. It's just so good. It's really clever. Just a really well written episode of television, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice because obviously at that point it's a Russell T Davies story, but he was mostly writing the big season finale, so it was good that he, I think, was able to write a much smaller story.
Yeah. So there we go. A couple more to mention. Your next one you've got here from the Peter Capaldi years, Flatline from 2014.
Clara, wait, go back. Back, that mural. That is a nervous system. Scaled up and flattened. I think we've found PC Forest. What's left of it, at least.
A nervous system.
The mural in the flat. That wasn't a desert at all. It's a microscopic blow-up of human skin.
What? Why?
Whatever they are experimenting. They are testing. They are dissecting. Trying to understand us. Trying to understand 3 dimensions.
Flatline is about there's some strange deaths in Bristol. Where people seem to be vanishing inside their walls, and it's just got some really good monsters who are these monsters that have a very different idea of what dimensions are to us, and they try to they're 2D, and then when they try to pull themselves into 3D space, they have these sort of flickering faces all over them. It's not really one that's talked about much, but I really enjoy it a lot.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds really good. And then finally, the last one that you've got here on your list of faves is a 3-parter from the Peter Capaldi years, Face the Raven, Heaven Sent, and Hellbent. And this one, am I right in saying you mentioned, Alison, that this is your favourite ever? Is that right?
I think that Heaven Sent, the middle story, is probably it's apart from a couple episodes of Twin Peaks, it's probably my favourite episode of television. But it is a 3-parter. You do need to have watched Face the Raven to get the context of what's happening, because something very big happens at the end of Face the Raven that's sort of unprecedented.
Right.
The Heaven Sent specifically is a story where the Doctor is completely alone. He's trapped inside a strange castle that is constantly rotating like clockwork, and there is a veiled creature surrounded by flies that is sort of like the It Follows monster, is constantly walking towards him wherever he is, and he just keeps having to run from it and try to work out why he is in this castle, what this creature is, and it has a twist I really won't spoil because it's an all-timer, but there is a twist where you realise something that is happening that is like I found it jaw-dropping.
Yes. Now that you're talking about it, I think I know which one you're talking about. Actually, really interesting, quite dark, right?
It's very it's
sort of dark in a very sort of almost cosmic, sort of existential way. Yeah,
it's I really love it.
Very cool. So there we go. Well, there were probably so many more episodes we could talk about, Alison, aren't there? But we only have so much time. So I'm going to quickly whiz through those on your list one more time. So we started off with the Dalek Invasion of Earth from 1964, William Hartnell. Then we jumped to Tomb of the Cybermen, Patrick Troughton. Then The Web of Fear, another Patrick Troughton from 1968. Then Inferno, John Pertwee, 1970, and then through to The Brain of Morbius from 1976, Tom Baker. The Robots of Death, also Tom Baker. The Curse of Fenric from the Sylvester McCoy era. Then up to the revival, The Empty Child, Christopher Eccleston. The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit from David Tennant. Human Nature and the Family of Blood. Then, of course, Blink and Midnight. And then from Peter Capaldi years, Flatline and Face the Raven, Heaven Sent and Hellbent. Amazing. Well, it's a good list to get people started if people need some good recommendations.
You know what? I think if you've never seen a Doctor Who episode before, I think you should watch Flatline out of context, I think it's just a good standalone story with fun monsters. So that would be my recommendation that some people will probably not agree with, but we'll see.
I love it. I haven't seen that one, so I will make sure I go and check that one out as soon as we finish. That's awesome. Well, there you go, Alison. Thank you so much. I'm going to finish with a final question, which is a difficult question in a way. But what do you think is the future of Doctor Who? I mean, the show has already been going on for 60 years nearly. It's coming up to its 60th anniversary, I suppose, in 2023. But do you think... is this show just going to keep going? Do you think it will eventually run out of steam? What do you think?
I think, it might not be on screens forever. It might take a break. There are lots of possibilities. I think it will always exist in some form because it's such an enduring idea that there'll always be people who want to make more Doctor Who. And interesting, it's had a lot of impact on other stories. Even I didn't love it, but the Marvel Loki show was very clearly influenced by Doctor Who.
Yes, absolutely.
More than anything else.
yeah, you're so right. It is. I mean, I know. I think wasn't one of the writers or the director Kate Herron involved in? I think somebody was, or even if they weren't involved in Doctor Who, I think they were just unabashed fans of Doctor Who. I think even the people that made Loki. So I think there's a very direct parallel there, isn't there?
And as a horror connection. Mike Flanagan is a reported fan of Doctor Who. And so it's interesting to watch some of the way he uses time in some of his stuff and then think about Doctor Who.
That's so true. And, its influence is just ridiculously vast, isn't it? I mean, we probably couldn't even begin to talk about what Doctor Who is inspired, I suppose, since its birth. But I'm sure it's safe to say that without Doctor Who, there'd probably be no, shows like Lost even, so many kind of time travel, sci-fi, horror, any shows like that in a way feel like they owe a debt in some form or another to Doctor Who, don't they? Yeah,
and so many horror films, you look at them and then you wonder if maybe Doctor Who did it first.
Yes.
Like I was saying with Alien, did Ridley Scott see the Ark in space? I don't know.
Yeah, totally. Or something like Event Horizon, I could imagine. Yeah, there's loads, isn't there? Particularly in the kind of cosmic sci-fi horror world. Yeah. So there you go. Well, thank you, Alison. This was, a hell of a task for you for your first appearance on this podcast.
It was my pleasure.
to talk about, 60 years of television in depth like this. But you've been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And just remind us again, Alison, where can people keep a lookout for your upcoming book if they want to pick up a copy when it's out?
People can follow me on Twitter at HangsAWoman. My novel is called Tell Me I'm Worthless. It is out at the end of October. You can pre-order it from my publisher's website, which is the Cypher Press. You can also pre-order it from Waterstones, from Amazon, sort of from any from your local bookshop I'd recommend trying that because I want to support local bookshops. You can go in and ask about it there.
Fantastic.
It's a strange haunted house story about British politics.
Love it. That sounds right up my street. I cannot wait to read it. Well, Alison, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. And one more time, a huge thank you to my brand new guest, Alison Rumfitt, who did such an incredible job. That was a mammoth task. I hope we did it justice, covering that entire history of that show, talking about some of the best, scariest, and most iconic episodes. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to that. And now I would love to hear from you. What did you think of our discussion? And what do you think of Doctor Who? Are there any particular episodes that we haven't mentioned that you would love to recommend? I'm pretty new to Doctor Who, as you can tell, so I would love to get some more recommendations for good episodes to check out. You can email me, evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on all the socials, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and there's a discussion group. That's where you can chat to me and fellow listeners. Head on over to Facebook and find the Evolution of Horror discussion group. Don't forget, if you want to support this podcast and get treated to regular bonus episodes, then sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. You can sign up at either $5 per month, $10 or $20 and get different benefits accordingly. We've got tons of really awesome bonus episodes coming out over the next few weeks, so get involved. You can find all previous seasons and episodes of this podcast on our website, evolutionofhorror.com. You can pick yourself up a little EOH t-shirt or hoodie, also on our website, evolutionofhorror.com/shop. You can find this podcast on all major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Podbean, Acast, Stitcher, Libsyn, and Spotify. If you get a spare minute, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment to drop us a little rating or review on Apple Podcasts, which really helps us get discovered by new listeners. So, onwards to next week, and we are returning to cinema, to the 1970s. But again, something a little bit different. This isn't your conventional horror movie, but I couldn't not discuss it. Next week, we are going to be talking about transvestite singing aliens from transsexual Transylvania. Next week, we're going to be covering the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I'm going to be joined by Michael Blythe to talk about the movie and Neil Brand to talk a little bit about the music. It's going to be a fantastic episode. Join us next week for all of this and more on the evolution of horror.